As the country is reflecting on the legacy of Jimmy Carter, his work with Habitat for Humanity to provide affordable housing remained a priority for him long after he left the White House. Still building homes well into his 90s, Carter didn't even let a bad fall stop him from volunteering. In 2019, here you see him. He showed up to help build homes in Nashville just hours after getting 14 stitches and suffering a black eye. One California woman remembers when the former president helped build her home.
He wanted the low-income families to be able to own our homes. He wanted to help us in that way.
Well, now the country's homelessness crisis has hit a new record high. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development reporting homelessness increased 18% from 2023. Let's talk about this now with the CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Ann Oliva. And first thoughts for you on the passing of such a consequential advocate for housing like President Carter.
Well, one, thank you so much for having me on today to talk about this, the tie between affordable housing and homelessness. It's so important. And President Carter, I had an opportunity this morning to listen to an interview with him. And what really struck me was his deep understanding of the ties between poverty and discrimination and lack of access to wealth building and homelessness, and his ironclad commitment to the dignity of housing. And I wish that all of our elected leaders had that same ironclad commitment.
There is a new report that shows homelessness, as I mentioned, has reached another record high. Can you talk a little bit about what is driving this surge?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is, in its simplest terms, the fact that there is not enough housing that is affordable to people at the lowest incomes across this country. The gap between incomes and rent is getting bigger, not smaller. And therefore, in 2023, the year leading up to the count that's in the report that you just mentioned, on average, 19,000 people became homeless for the first time every week, on average, across the year. And that includes really vulnerable populations like older adults, that's seniors who are getting priced out of their housing. It includes families with kids. It includes people who are struggling with unemployment or underemployment or substance use or mental health issues. So what we're seeing really is this increase in the number of people who are becoming homeless for the first time, and that's reflected in the report that you're talking about.
And what about the surge of asylum seekers? What role is that playing in this?
That is definitely a part of this story, especially in some parts of the country where asylum seekers or new arrivals really sort of were relocated to those areas. I think you can see in the report that there are some places that had increases in asylum seekers. But what HUD doesn't do is actually collect data on the number of people who are asylum seekers. So the report doesn't actually bear that out. But that's only part of the story. The rest of the story is that folks can't afford housing, especially folks at the very lowest incomes. And many of those people are employed. So the gap between their incomes and the cost of rent across the country is getting bigger and bigger. And the number of units that we need in order to have enough affordable housing available is in the millions.
The Biden administration says that this data is outdated and, quote, no longer reflects the situation that we're seeing. What do you think about that? And can you tell us about what the government has done to reduce homelessness over the last year? Were there other conditions that changed?
I think generally when the federal government refers to that data being outdated, so you should note that data was collected in January of 2024, the last 10 days of January of 2024. That was at the height of the migration crisis. So I do think that in some communities, the numbers have changed because they've been able to get folks housed and they've closed shelters for new arrivals. All of that said, the gap, again, the gap that we have in the number of units that are affordable to people at the lowest incomes is in the millions, about 7.3 million units. And the median rent in the United States is about 18% higher today than it was in 2020. Those things have not changed. That said, the administration and Congress have worked to provide resources to the homeless services system and to invest in affordable housing, but not at the scale that we need.
Yeah, we see it in our communities. It's inescapable. And Oliva, thank you so much for the conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.